Okay, so today I'm going to talk about one of the generally last steps that you'll want to take when you're finishing up a painting, and that is working on the edges around objects and between objects. So for the most part, I've finished this blue twisted vase here, but I could still make it look a little bit more three-dimensional by blurring and softening some of the edges on it. Now this can be counterintuitive. A lot of times people want to get really stark, precise, exact edges. They take all the blurring out of the edges, and that actually tends to make the object look flatter rather than three-dimensional. Okay, so the three colors I'll be using to work with the edges on this vase will be Phthalo Blue, that's my greenish blue, Hansa Yellow Light, which is similar to a cadmium yellow light or a lemon yellow. It's my yellow that tends towards blue or green. And then just my standard titanium white. And for the most part, I'll be using this small flathead brush. One disadvantage of using this brush is that it is a little bit old. I've used it quite a bit, so that means that the bristles on it are kind of splayed apart. So a newer brush would be better, but I think I can make this one work for now. So to start, I'm just going to work on a little bit more blurring of this edge in here. And the way I'm going to try that initially is I'm just going to take a bunch of mixing medium, going to add a little bit of phthalo blue to that to make a phthalo blue glaze. And then I'm just going to glaze, not quite as dark of a glaze as I wanted. I'm just going to glaze along this edge, and I'm even going to blend some of that glaze into the shadow. This is kind of an experiment. I don't really know if it will work all the way, but I'm just seeing if that's a way I can get the shadow to blur a little bit more with the edge of the vase. That's a technique called sfumato, where you're really blurring the edges or even blurring an edge into a shadow, and it tends to make things look really three-dimensional. Okay, so now I'll go in with my glaze here, blur this edge even more. So while I've got this glaze, also here is another area where there's a really sudden transition along the edge. I don't want it to be quite that sudden. Alright, that's not really doing much, so I think I'll take my phthalo and make a tint of the phthalo. So I'm just mixing phthalo and white, and I'm just going to bring a bit of that in along this edge here to create that blurring effect. And I'll actually grab one more brush. I do want a fairly small brush to use for feathering. Seeing what I have in my collection here. This one will be good. So this one I'm using to blend the edges even a little more. Is also more stark than what I wanted. So the trick is not to blend the edges so much that it changes the proportions of the objects, but to do it enough that I'm getting that soft look to the edge, which especially for rounded objects is going to help it look more three-dimensional. Now what you really don't want is any raw canvas showing through along your edges. That will tend to make the painting look really unfinished. So that is why I suggested doing a really simple underpainting before you even began painting in your objects, because that way you've got a thick layer of paint underneath and you don't even have to worry about raw canvas showing through anywhere. Okay, so now I'm going to step back from this, see if it's making a difference, see if it's too much. Oh yeah, I'm liking that a lot. I'm hoping the camera will pick this up because it is subtle, but it really increases the three-dimensionality. Okay, so now I made that edge a little too stark again, so I'm just taking a really tiny brush, loading it with mixing medium, going through and just blurring that. Now if I get any paint on there I don't want, and it hasn't been on there long, I can take a little piece of paper towel and just kind of wipe it away. Okay, other places that I'm going to use the same glaze will be along this edge here. So that wasn't quite see-through enough of a glaze, so I've got my thin brush, all it has on it is mixing medium. Go through like that. So I'm just looking for other areas where I still want to soften up those edges, like here, for example.